Hi, darlings. It's lovely to see you. We're up to chapter 5 of Pippi Longstocking. This is chapter 5. Pippi sits on the gate and climbs a tree. There's the tree in Pippi's garden. Outside Villa Kula sat Pippi, Tommy and Annika. Pippi was sitting on one of the gate posts. Annika was on the other, while Tommy was sitting on the gate itself. It was a warm and beautiful day in late August. August is summer where they live, like it is where you live in California. A pear tree that stood very close to the gate stretched its branches so far down that the children could sit there and pick the best little yellow and red August pears without much trouble at all. They munched and crunched, spitting the pips out onto the road. Villa Kula stood just where the little town ended and the countryside began, and where the street turned into a country road. The people in the little town were very fond of taking a stroll out towards Villa Kula because it was the prettiest area of all. Just as the children were sitting there eating pears, a girl came walking down the road from town. When she caught sight of the children, she stopped and asked, "Have you seen my papa go past?" Said Pippi. "What does he look like? Does he have blue eyes?" "Yes," said the girl. "About average height, not too tall, not too short?" "Yes," said the girl. "A black hat and black shoes?" "Yes, that's right," said the girl eagerly. "No, we haven't seen him," said Pippi firmly. The girl looked disappointed and started off without another word. "Wait a minute," Pippi called after her. "Is he bald?" "No, certainly not," said the girl angrily. "Lucky for him," said Pippi as she spat out a pip. The girl was now in a hurry to leave, but then Pippi shouted, "Does he have unnaturally big ears that reach all the way down to his shoulders?" "No," said the girl, turning around in surprise. "Surely you don't mean that you've seen a man walk past here with big ears like that?" "I've never seen anyone walk with his ears," said Pippi. "Everyone I know walks with their feet." "Ugh, how stupid you are. I mean, have you really seen a man who has such big ears?" "Well, no," said Pippi. "Nobody has big ears like that. That would be absurd. And how would it look? Nobody should have ears as big as that. At least, not in this country," she added after giving it some thought. "In China, things are a little different, you know. I once saw a Chinese man in Shanghai. His ears were so big that he used them as a cloak. Whenever it rained, he would just crawl in under his ears, and that was the warmest and best place to be, although it wasn't so nice for his ears, of course. If the weather was especially bad, he used to invite his friends and acquaintances to camp out under his ears. There they would sit singing their melancholy songs until the storm had passed away." They were all very fond of him because of his ears. They were all very fond of him because of his ears. Hai Shang was his name. You should have seen Hai Shang dashing off to work in the morning. He would always come running at the last minute because he was so fond of sleeping late in the morning. And you can't imagine how sweet it looked when he came rushing up with his ears fluttering behind him like two big sails. The girl had stopped and was standing there with her mouth open, listening to Pippi. And Tommy and Annika had lost interest in eating more pears. They were too busy listening to the story. "He had more children than he could count, and the youngest one was named Peta," said Pippi. "Oh, but a Chinese child can't be called Peta," Tommy objected. That was exactly what his wife told him. "A Chinese child can't be called Peta," she said. But Hai Shang was terribly stubborn, and he said that either the child would be named Peta or nothing at all. And then he sat down in a corner and pulled his ears over his head and sulked. So his poor wife had to give in, of course, and the boy was named Peter. Really? Said Annika. He was the most troublesome child in all of Shanghai, Pippi went on. He was so fussy about his food that he made his mama very unhappy. Now, you do know that they eat birds' nests in China, don't you? So there sat his mama with a whole plate of birds' nests trying to feed him. All right, little Peter, she said, let's eat a bird's nest for Papa. But Peter just pressed his lips together and shook his head. Finally, Hai Shang got so mad at his son that he said no new food would be cooked for Peter until he ate a bird's nest for Papa. And when Hai Shang said something, that was how it was to be. That same bird's nest went back and forth from the kitchen from May until October. On the 14th of July, Peter's mama begged to be allowed to give him a cup of soup. But Hai Shang said no. Nonsense, said the girl on the road. Yes, that's exactly what Hai Shang said, Pippi said. Nonsense, he said. It's obvious that the boy could eat the bird's nest if he'd only stopped being so stubborn. But Peter just pressed his lips together the whole time, from May until October. May, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, all of those months. But how could he stay alive? Asked Tommy in astonishment. He couldn't stay alive, said Pippi. He died from pure stubbornness on the 18th of October, and he was buried on the 19th. And on the 20th, a swallow came flying through the window and laid eggs in the bird's nest that was sitting on the table. So at least that was put to good use. No harm done, said Pippi merrily. Then she gazed thoughtfully at the girl who was standing there looking bewildered. You've certainly got an odd look on your face, said Pippi. What's the matter? Surely you don't think that I'm sitting here telling lies, do you? Excuse me? Just tell me if that's what you think, said Pippi ominously as she pushed up her sleeves. No, not at all, said the girl, sounding scared. I wouldn't exactly say that you were lying, but you wouldn't, huh? Said Pippi. Well, that's precisely what I am doing. I'm lying so much that my tongue has turned black. Can't you tell? Do you really think that a boy could live without food from May until October? All right, I know he could manage without food for 3 or 4 months or so, but from May to October? That's just plain nonsense. Surely you realise that has to be a lie. You really shouldn't believe everything people tell you. Then the girl took off and she didn't turn around again. Some people really are gullible, Pippi said to Tommy and Annika. From May until October. How stupid can you be? Then she yelled after the girl, No, we haven't seen your papa. We haven't seen a single bald man all day long. But yesterday, 17 of them went by, arm in arm. Pippi's garden was truly delightful. It was not well kept, no it wasn't, but it had glorious lawns that were never mown, and old rose bushes full of white and yellow and pink roses. They may not have been particularly elegant, of course, but they had such a lovely scent. A good many fruit trees grew there too, and best of all, several ancient oak and elm trees that were perfect for climbing. Tommy and Annika's garden had very few climbing trees, and their parents were always so afraid that they would fall and hurt themselves. That's why they hadn't done much climbing so far. But now Pippi said, Why don't we climb that oak tree over there? The children were instantly jumped down from the gate, delighted at the suggestion. A couple of metres above the ground, the oak split into two, and right at the spot where it split, there was a small, flat space. It didn't take long before all 3 children were sitting up there. Above their heads, the oak spread out its crown like a green roof. This would be a good place to drink coffee, said Pippi. I'll just run into the house and make us a pot. Tommy and Annika clapped their hands and shouted, Yippee! There's Annika and there's Pippi down the bottom and Tommy in the tree. It didn't take long before Pippi had the coffee ready. She had baked rolls the day before. She took up a position at the foot of the oak tree and started tossing up coffee cups. Tommy and Annika caught them, but sometimes it was the oak that caught them, and 2 coffee cups broke. Pippi ran back to the house for more. Then it was the rolls' turn, and for a long time there was a shower of rolls in the air. At least they didn't break. Finally, Pippi climbed up, holding the coffee pot in one hand. She also brought cream in a bottle and sugar in a little box. Tommy and Annika thought that coffee had never tasted so good before. They weren't allowed to drink coffee every day, only when they were invited out, and now they had been invited out. Annika spilled a little coffee on her lap. At first it was hot and wet, and then it was cold and wet, but Annika said that didn't matter. So that's Pippi throwing the cups up to Tommy and Annika to catch, and they're hooking them onto the tree. When they were finished, Pippi tossed the cups down to the lawn. "I want to see if the china they make these days is very sturdy," she said. Strangely enough, 1 cup and all 3 plates survived intact. The coffee pot lost only its spout. Then Pippi decided to climb a little higher up the tree. "Have you ever seen such a thing?" she shouted suddenly. "This tree is hollow." There was a big hole in the trunk. The leaves had hidden it from the children's view. "Oh, can I climb up and see it too?" said Tommy, but there was no answer. "Pippi, where are you?" he shouted uneasily. Then they heard Pippi's voice, but it wasn't coming from above. It was far below them. It sounded as if it came from underground. "I'm inside the tree. It's hollow, all the way down to the ground. If I peek out through a little crack, I can see the coffee pot lying on the grass outside." "But how are you going to get back up?" cried Annika. "I'm never getting back up," said Pippi. "I'm going to stay here until I retire. And you'll have to drop food down to me through the hole up above 5 or 6 times a day." Annika started to cry. "Why weep and moan?" said Pippi. "The 2 of you should come down here with me, and then we can pretend that we're languishing away in a dungeon." "Not on your life," said Annika, and for safety's sake she climbed down from the tree altogether. "Annika, I can see you through the crack," cried Pippi. "Don't step on the coffee pot. It's a nice old coffee pot that has never done anyone any harm. It's not the pot's fault that it doesn't have a spout anymore." Annika went over to the tree trunk, and through a little crack she could see the very tip of Pippi's index finger. This made her feel a whole lot better, but she was still worried. "Pippi, is it really true that you can't get back up?" she asked. Pippi's finger disappeared, and it didn't take even a minute before her face was sticking out of the hole, high up in the tree. "Maybe I can if I really try," she said, as she pushed aside the leaves with her hands. "Is it that easy to climb back up?" said Tommy, who was still up in the tree. "Then I want to try going down inside and languishing for a while." "All right," said Pippi, "but I think we should get a ladder." She crawled her way out of the hole and quickly slid down to the ground. Then she ran to get a ladder, which she lugged up into the tree and lowered down into the hole in the middle. Tommy couldn't wait to try it out. It was quite difficult to climb up to the hole because it was high up, but Tommy was brave, and he wasn't afraid to climb down inside the dark tree trunk either. Annika watched him disappear, and she really wondered if she would ever see him again. She tried peeking through the crack, because remember, Annika's on the ground outside. "Annika," she heard Tommy's voice say, "you wouldn't believe how wonderful it is in here. You really have to come inside too. It's not the least bit dangerous if you use a ladder. Once you try it, you won't want to do anything else." "Are you sure?" said Annika. "Absolutely," said Tommy. So with trembling legs, Annika climbed back up the tree. She shrank back a bit when she saw how dark it was inside the trunk, but Pippi held her hand and encouraged her. "Don't be scared, Annika," she heard Tommy say from below. "I can see your legs now, and I'll be sure to catch you if you fall." But Annika didn't fall. She climbed down to Tommy, safe and sound, and Pippi followed a moment later. "Isn't this great?" said Tommy, and Annika had to agree. It wasn't nearly as dark as she had thought because light was coming in through the crack. Annika went over to see if she too could see the coffee pot on the grass outside. "This will be a hiding place," said Tommy. "No one will ever know we're in here. And if they go around outside looking for us, we'll be able to watch them through the crack. And then we'll laugh. We could get a little twig and poke it through the crack and tickle them," said Pippi. "And then they'll think the tree's haunted." At this thought, the children were so happy that they all hugged each other. Then they heard the gong ringing, which meant that Tommy and Annika had to go home for dinner. "How stupid," said Tommy. "We have to go home now, but we'll come over tomorrow as soon as we get home from school." "Do that," said Pippi. And then they climbed up the ladder, first Pippi, then Annika, and last of all Tommy. And then they climbed down from the tree, first Pippi, then Annika, and last of all Tommy. Chapter 6. Pippi organises an expedition. And there's Mr. Nelson at the beginning of chapter 6. Waiting for Pippi. "Today we're not going to school," Tommy told Pippi, "because it's a house cleaning holiday." "Ha!" cried Pippi. "Yet another injustice. I certainly don't get any house cleaning holiday. Not me, no matter how much I might need it. Just look at my kitchen floor. But actually," she added, "when I really think about it, I can clean even without a holiday. And that's what I'm thinking of doing right now. Cleaning holiday or no cleaning holiday. I'd like to see somebody try and stop me. Go and sit on the kitchen table so you won't get in the way." Tommy and Annika obediently climbed up onto the table, and Mr. Nelson hopped up there too, and then lay down to sleep in Annika's lap. Pippi heated a big kettle of water, which she then emptied onto the kitchen floor. After that, she took off her big shoes and placed them neatly on the breadboard. Then she tied 2 scrubbing brushes onto her bare feet and began skating all over the floor, making a squishing noise as she ploughed her way through the water. "I really should have been a skating princess," she said, lifting one leg straight up in the air so that the scrubbing brush on her left foot hit the ceiling lamp and broke off a piece. "I've got grace and charm at least," she went on, taking a big leap over a chair that stood in her way. "Well, it must be clean now," she said at last, and took off the brushes. "Aren't you going to dry the floor?" asked Annika. "Nope, it can dry in the sun," said Pippi. "I don't think it'll catch cold, so long as it keeps moving." Tommy and Annika climbed down from the table and crossed the floor as carefully as they could so they wouldn't get wet. Outside, the sun was shining in a bright blue sky. It was one of those dazzling September days when you feel like going for a walk in the woods. Pippi had an idea. "What do you think about taking Mr. Nelson with us and going on a little expedition?" "Oh, yes," shouted Tommy and Annika with delight. "Run home and ask your mother then," said Pippi. "In the meantime, I'll make a packed lunch." Tommy and Annika thought that was a good plan. They dashed home, and it wasn't long before they were back. By then, Pippi was already standing at the gate with Mr. Nelson on his shoulder, a walking stick in one hand and a big basket in the other. At first, the children walked along the country road, but then they turned off into a field where a nice little path wound its way between birch trees and hazel thickets. After a while, they came to a gate, and beyond the gate was a field that was even more beautiful. But a cow had taken up a position right in front of the gate, and she didn't look as if she wanted to move. Annika shouted at the cow, and Tommy went over and tried to shove her aside, but she refused to budge from the spot, She just stared at the children with her big cow eyes. To put an end to the whole thing, Pippi set down the basket and went over and lifted the cow out of the way. Embarrassed, the cow lumbered off through the hazel thickets. "To think that cows can be so bull-headed," said Pippi as she jumped over the gate, landing on both feet. "And what happens then? Bulls get cow-headed, of course. It's really quite disgusting to think about." "What a beautiful, beautiful field," cried Annika with delight, stepping from one rock to another. Tommy had brought along the dagger that Pippi had given him, and he cut walking sticks for both Annika and himself. He also cut his thumb a bit, but that didn't matter. "Maybe we should pick a few toadstools," said Pippi, breaking off a beautiful red toadstool. "I wonder if it's all right to eat this kind," she went on. "You can't very well drink it, as far as I know, so I suppose there's no other choice but to eat it. I hope that's all right." And there's Tommy and Annika and Pippi's picking the toadstools. She bit off a big piece of the toadstool and swallowed it. "No problem," she proclaimed with delight. "Well, that's the kind we should collect and cook next time," she said, tossing the toadstool high over the treetops. "What do you have in the basket, Pippi?" asked Annika. "Some goodies?" "I'm not going to tell you, not even for $1,000, Pippi told her. "First, we have to find a good place where we can spread out everything." The children eagerly began looking for just such a place. Annika found a big flat rock she thought was suitable, but it was swarming with red ants. "I don't want to sit with them because they haven't been properly introduced," said Pippi. "And besides, they bite," said Tommy. "Do they?" said Pippi. "Well, bite them back." Then Tommy caught sight of a small glade between a couple of hazel thickets, and that's where he thought they should sit. "No, you know what? There's not enough sunshine there to make my Freckles happy," said Pippi. "And I think Freckles is so nice looking." Some distance away was a small hill that could be easily and quickly climbed. On top of the hill was a sunny little ledge, just like a balcony. That's where they sat down. "Now, close your eyes while I take everything out," said Pippi. Tommy and Annika shut their eyes as tight as they could. They heard Pippi opening the basket and rustling some paper. 1, 2, 19, now you can look," Pippi said at last. And so they looked, and they shouted with delight when they saw all the treats that Pippi had set out on the bare rock. There were delicious little sandwiches with meatballs and ham, a whole stack of pancakes with sugar, several pieces of little brown sausage, and 3 pineapple puddings. Because, you see, Pippi had learned all about preparing food from the cook on her father's ship. "It's great having a house cleaning holiday," said Tommy with his mouth full of pancake. "We should have it all the time." "That's going too far," said Pippi. "I don't like cleaning that much. It's fun, there's no doubt about it, but not every day. That would get really boring." At last the children were so full that they could hardly move, and so they sat there in the sunshine, just enjoying themselves. "I wonder whether it's hard to fly," said Pippi, peering over the rim of the ledge with a dreamy expression. There was a steep drop beneath them. It was an awfully long way to the ground. "It should be easy enough to learn to fly down," she went on. "I'm sure it's much harder to fly up, but a person could always start with the easiest part. I think I'll try it." "No, Pippi!" shouted both Tommy and Annika. "Oh, please, Pippi, don't do it." But Pippi was already standing on the edge of the precipice. "Fly, you mighty flea! Fly!" And the flighty flea flew, she said. And as she said the word flew, she raised her arms and stepped off into thin air. Half a second later they heard a thud. That was Pippi hitting the ground. Tommy and Annika lay down on their stomachs and peered down at her in terror. Pippi stood up and brushed her knees. "I forgot to flap my arms," she said cheerfully. "Plus, I probably have too many pancakes in my tummy. At that moment, the children realised that Mr. Nilsson had disappeared. He had apparently set off on a little expedition of his own. They remembered having seen him contentedly gnawing the lunch basket to shreds, but during Pippi's flying exercise, they had forgotten all about him. And now he was gone. Pippi got so angry that she threw one of her shoes into a deep pool of water. "You should never take a monkey with you when you go anywhere," she said. "He really should have stayed at home and picked fleas off the horse. That should have served him right." She went on as she stepped into the pool to retrieve her shoe. The water came up to her waist. "Actually, I might as well wash my hair while I'm here," said Pippi, ducking her head under water for so long that bubbles started to surface. "All right, now there's no need to go to the hairdresser this time," she continued, sounding pleased when she finally reappeared. She climbed out of the water and put on her shoes. Then they set off to look for Mr. Nilsson. "Hey, just listen how it squishes when I walk," laughed Pippi. "My clothes say squish, squish, and my shoes say slosh, slosh. It's really funny." "It's easy to get cross with Mr. Nilsson," said Pippi. "He always does this. He once ran away from me in Surabaya and took a job as a servant with an old widow." After a pause, she added, "That last part was a lie, of course." Tommy suggested that they each go in a different direction to search, and so each of the 3 children went off in a different direction. Tommy took the path across the meadow. He didn't find Mr. Nilsson, but he did find something else, a bull. Or rather, the bull found Tommy, and the bull didn't care for Tommy because that bull was an angry animal and not at all fond of children. He came rushing over with his head lowered, bellowing horribly, and Tommy gave a loud yelp of terror that could be heard through the whole woods. Pippi and Annika heard it too and came running to see why Tommy was shouting like that. By then the bull had already managed to snag Tommy with his horns and had tossed him high up in the air. "What a foolish bull that is," said Pippi to Annika, who was crying hard. "He shouldn't be doing things like that. He's getting Tommy's white sailor suit all dirty. I'm going to have to go and talk some sense into that stupid bull." And she did. She ran over and tugged on his tail. And there's Pippi tugging on the bull's tail. "Excuse me for breaking in," she said. Since she was tugging quite hard, the bull turned around and caught sight of another child that he wanted to snag with his horns. "As I said, 'Excuse me for breaking in,'" Pippi repeated. "And 'excuse me for breaking this off," she added, as she broke off one of the bull's horns. "This year, it's no longer fashionable to have 2 horns," she said. "This year, all the better bulls have only 1 horn, or none at all," she said as she broke off the other horn. Since bulls have no feeling in their horns, the bull didn't know that his horns were gone. But he started vigorously butting Pippi, and if she had been anyone else, the bull would have made mincemeat of her. "Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Stop tickling me!" cried Pippi. "You have no idea how ticklish I am. Ha ha! Stop, stop! I'm going to die laughing." But the bull didn't stop, and finally Pippi jumped up onto his back to get a moment's peace. But the peace didn't last long, of course, because the bull didn't like having Pippi on his back. He started a terrific bucking to shake her off, but she just squeezed her legs tight and held on. The bull rushed back and forth in the paddock, bellowing so hard that smoke seemed to be pouring out of his nostrils. Pippi laughed and shrieked and waved to Tommy and Annika, who stood some distance away, shaking like aspen leaves. The bull spun round and round, trying to throw Pippi off. "Here I am, dancing with my little friend," hummed Pippi, not budging from where she sat. Finally, the bull was so tired that he lay down on the ground, wishing that there were no children in the whole wide world. For that matter, He never did think that children were especially necessary. "Are you planning to take an afternoon nap now?" Pippi asked the bull politely. "In that case, I won't disturb you." She climbed down from his back and went over to Tommy and Annika. Tommy had been crying a little. He had a cut on one arm, but Annika had wrapped her handkerchief around it, and it didn't hurt any more. "Oh, Pippi!" shouted Annika, bubbling with excitement when Pippi came over to them. "Shh!" whispered Pippi. "Don't wake the bull. He's sleeping, and if we wake him up, he'll just get cranky." But the next second she shouted in a loud voice, "Mr. Nelson! Mr. Nelson, where are you?" She wasn't paying any attention to the bull's afternoon nap. "We have to go home now." And believe it or not, there sat Mr. Nelson, huddled up in a pine tree. He was sucking on his tail and looking quite miserable. It was no fun for such a little monkey to be left all alone in the woods. There he is, up the pine tree. You see him? Now he scampered down from the pine tree and leapt onto Pippi's shoulder. He began waving his straw hat the way he always did whenever he was really happy. "So you didn't become a servant this time, did you?" said Pippi, stroking his back. "No, wait. That's true. It was a lie," she added. "But if it was true, it couldn't be a lie, could it?" she pondered. "Well, all is said and done. He might actually have been a servant in Surabaya after all. If so, I know who's going to make the meatballs from now on." And then they headed home. Pippi's dress was still squishing, and her shoes were still sloshing. Tommy and Annika thought they'd had a wonderful day in spite of the bull, and they sang a song they'd learned in school. It was actually a summer song, but even though it would soon be autumn, they thought that it was the right song to be singing. "On a summery and sunny day, we walked through green woods on the way. Not a word of complaint, come what may. We sing as we go, sing high, sing low. The young among you come and sing too. Don't sit at home with nothing to do. Our singing group climbs as one troop, reaching the top in one fell swoop. On a summery and sunny day, we sing as we go, sing high, sing low." Pippi sang along too, but she wasn't really singing the same words. This is what she sang. "On a summery and sunny day, I walk through green woods on the way, saying whatever I want to say. And it sloshes as I go, slosh slow, and in my shoe it squishes too. It says first ahem, and then a chew. My shoe is wet, a bull we met. Rice pudding is the best thing yet. On a summery and sunny day, it sloshes as I go, slosh slow, slosh slow." And that's the end of chapter 6, and that's the end of the reading today, my darlings. I love you, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.